Well, these testimonials give a clear hint of how consumers and academics think that the role of the energy suppliers will change and what their role could be in a new energy system with digitalization. Now, let's welcome our panel of experts to talk about the challenges for the energy sector. My four guests today are Eva De Bleeker, Secretary of State responsible for Budget and Consumer Affairs, Mathieu Michel, Secretary of State responsible for Digitization, Wytse Kaastra, Managing Director Utilities at Accenture, and calling in from home via a video connection, Kristian, Secretary General at EURELECTRIC. Welcome to the four of you. Monsieur Michel, if I can start with you, we're in an era where we are a bit optimistic now. We are getting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. The COVID crisis seems to be over in our country, or at least we hope so. Europe has made a big plan, a recovery plan, in which energy and digitalization are very important. How is that plan translated in our country, and what are the opportunities that you see for the FEBEC members?
So I think that the recovery plan can make us really optimistic. There is a lot of projects who are completely oriented towards innovation, toward digitalization. So that's really a good point for us, and that's an opportunity that we must seize to completely change the game. In fact, it has been said in that inspiring keynote by Peter Hinsen. So there are key projects to my mind, like for example the deployment of the electric cars, like for example the investment in the buildings to make them more neutral in carbon. So there is a lot of projects who are key projects. One of the projects that I like the most is the project about unleashing data. We know that in the evolution of the innovation in the electric sector, the way we will manage the data, the personal data, but also the big data, will be a keystone, I think, in the way we will be able to make innovation, to innovate. That was a key word in the keynote that we've just heard. And you have already see that's a big concern in my mind, because the data built, the way we manage data, the trust about data, the transparency about data will be really important to build the trust in innovation, and that is the trust in innovation that will make a new world possible. That is for me something really important, and the recovery plan. For me, is really something that can make us really optimistic, because that's completely turned toward innovation and future.
And it's also what you will be investing in, I imagine.
Yeah, that's my plan. Every day since some months now, I think about data protection, trust, confidence, because technology innovation is based on data, and that is one of my key feature. There's also something that I feel that I think really interesting and really important in that recovery plan is that the fact that's a recovery plan who was built together. We spoke about the importance of the network, the way we connect people, and that is a plan that can be managed together with all the stakeholders, with government, of course, but with the sector, with the consumer, the citizens. That's really important, and that fact of connecting people will be a key factor of the success that we try to reach.
Wytse Kaastra, is that also what you heard from Peter Hinsen, the potential of innovation through data, through networking, and is that what the digitalization of this sector should be about?
No, I fully agree. I mean, to be honest, I think we are already one step further. Digitization is what we have done in the past 5 years, and now we need to take it to the next level, leveraging, I would say, the energy transition, the Green Deal. The stars are aligned, so digital meets sustainability, and I think that's what we are seeing right now. And clearly data is the fuel for everything, both for optimizing the current system, but also to innovate and come up with new type of solutions, which you don't even know today. So I think it's the fuel for innovation, it's the fuel for change, it's the fuel for optimization. and it's really up to the industry to make it work. And I liked also the quote of Peter Hinze talking about the network effect. Well, actually, a utility system is a big network, so we just need to create the digital network effect, and that's, I think, the challenge.
A lot of today will be about digitalization, and then, Mrs. De Bleeker, I come to you because we've seen a digital adoption moving on through the COVID-19 pandemic in almost every generation, but there is still a risk that some people might lag behind. Which means do you see to bridge the digital gap?
Yeah, it's true. And the good thing is that already a lot of people are part of this digitalization story, and that makes it easier for them to access services and goods, which is a good thing. But yeah, as digitalization will be an important role in the transition of the energy sector, then it's, as a Secretary of State for Consumer Protection, I'm also very concerned about the 10% of the population that is really vulnerable to this digitalization and who will not be able to take part if they're not able to keep up. Also in this next step you were referring to, everything that will come after the digitalization. It's important to understand which kind of digital gaps there are. I think you can count 3 categories. First of all, there is the access gap. So this is really about access to the laptops, the tablets, the smartphones. It appears that there are still people who have not who do not yet have this access, and also the network connection and the quality of the connection, of course. And as this is getting more and more important, we really have to make sure that everyone has the access to these products and services. And there I will work closely together with my fellow ministers and look at the system of social charges in telecoms to make sure that everyone can participate in this digital society. The second gap is the gap of the digital skills. It appears that 3 out of 10 people do not really know how to improve their digital skills in order to become more active and get better access to all the information that is available. And there I think the sector can play a very important part as well to help their consumers to get the right skills for the applications they will provide. And then thirdly, there is the utilization gap, and this is once this entry barrier has been overcome, then of course it is important to be able to seek the information and to analyze it and to use it strategically. And there it's important that we all, government and enterprises, really make sure that the information is readable for the consumers, and also we can use the more, how do you call it, the intuitive software, so that it's not just information, giving information, but that there can also be interaction. This will also help the customer and consumers to use the information to their benefit.
Digital tools will be very important to engage the customers in the energy transition. But how do customers today feel about the energy transition and about their energy suppliers? Grid operator Fluvius held a survey, and his CEO Frank van Brabant will give us a wrap-up of some of the conclusions.
The Constitutional Court in Belgium took a decision beginning of this year in which they put an end to the rollback counter system for PV production. Due to that, people lost their confidence in the authorities, and that's why we ordered a professional research study in which 1,000 people in Flanders were asked about their knowledge of the energy transition. And the result of the study showed that more than half of the population, more than 50%, doesn't even know what it is about. The consumers expect from the government a long-term vision which is clear, also correct incentives to help them change their behavior, and also an emphasis on the importance of the energy transition. For the consumer, the energy supplier is more a partner which gives them tips and tricks to help them change their behavior in relation to the energy market. They see the supplier more as an advisory partner to guide them through the energy transition. As a DSO, we see for ourselves more the role as a facilitator. We create a solid base so that we can facilitate the energy transition in favor of the customer and also with a customer-centric perspective.
Frank van Brabant. Kristian Ruby, immediately a question for you. You've just heard what these consumers are expecting from energy suppliers. From your point of view in Europe, do you see that the utilities are ready for this?
Well, thank you. I see, first of all, diversity. I see some world-leading players, frankly, that really define the best practice and state of the art, where whole companies are basically digitizing across the value chain through every single part of their operation. And then I see very different types of companies that have different means to invest and different types of assets and perhaps also a size that doesn't allow them basically to embrace the digital paradigm in the same way as they would like to, and that is frankly needed in a world that is moving so fast in the digital direction.
Thank you, Kristian. Mrs. De Bleeker, yes, the question will of course be how can we get consumers to understand the full potential of the new electric system, especially in a decade where we will electrify most of the things?
Yes, so the transition to affordable and reliable ways of energy supply and consumption and the role of digitalization in this is an important topic for consumers, absolutely. Consumers, we see that they have changed a lot since 10, 20 years ago. They become much more energy conscious, but also they want to get information and they want to make conscious choices. And to realize the full potential of this digital world, consumers must be aware of their rights, of course. And there is an important role for the companies. Mr. Delamagne already mentioned it, and I'm glad he did, and that they really want the consumers to know what are their rights, but also what are the possibilities for them in this digital world. The government verifies, of course, that far-reaching information is provided to the customers and the consumers, and that it's accessible and guaranteed for every consumer. And to ensure that the digitalization does not lead to an exclusion of consumers who are less engaged in this digital technology. Of course, this will be taken into account when we do the revision of the consumer agreement, which will take into account also this whole aspect of digital divide. My approach has always been, and it will always be, working together will take us far, but of course, if needed, then I will legislate and impose rules to protect the consumer, of course. But also the government has a role to play. Clearly, now we see that there's many different authorities dealing with questions and complaints, and I'm preparing a broad digital consumer point of contact where consumers can go to and ask their questions or try to get the information they want. For example, related to energy sector, this can be a place where they can get the information, their rights in the consumer agreement. But also, for example, if there is a case of phishing where the consumers are asked to pay a bill for an energy company that's not correct, that's fraud, then this will also be the place where the consumer can address their problems.
Okay. I think we have a question from one of our board members, Pierre Pignolet.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Michel. You mentioned trust in innovation, and I was wondering, it's clear that digital transformation in the energy sector will be key in the energy transition in the future. Now, what do you intend to do to speed up and to increase the digitization in the energy sector in the future?
Okay, thank you for your question. First, I have to mention one thing. We said that the sector had to be disruptive. I think that governments must also be disruptive in the way we manage digital regulation in the sector of energy. I think that you need we must be creative to help you in that matter. So a regulatory framework which is stabilized, which allow to be creative in the tarification, in the way the game is changing about the production of energy, for example, by the prosumer and so on, is something really interesting and important for me. There also a lot of attention that I pay now about the trust in digitalization. We say we've spoken about the digital gap, for example. I work for now on the data, for example, the ethics into artificial intelligence. Those are topics who are really concerning myself, and I work hard. Still yesterday, I had a webinar about the trust in the data, the trust in the privacy. Those are things that must be solved, and we must speak about that if we want to build trust and confidence in innovation. I'm afraid that some people, some key players who are experts in digitalization are still 10 years in front of the population. Eva has just said, okay, there is a digital gap in the citizen, in the population. 40% of our population is not not enough digitalized. That's a concern for us, and we have to work on that matter, and that is what I do with Eva, Petra de Sutter, and so on, to build more confidence in innovation.
Pierre Pignoret, thank you for your question. Mr. Michel, you referred to open data already. What is your policy with regards to open data, and how can you help the energy sector to develop new products and services with open data?
Okay, as I said a few minutes ago, there are two types of data. There are personal data, and that's about confidence and trust, and that's a problem because today the personal data are used by some companies without any regards to ethics, to privacy, and so on. So we have to build confidence and trust on personal data, for example, by anonymization, pseudonymization. That's something that's really important.
But the government as well has a lot of data, which could be very interesting.
That's for sure, and I come to that. But first, the personal data, we must build trust, and for now, it's not sufficient. We must go further in that domain, and I'm preparing the evaluation of the privacy law. That's something really important, and I'm working for now at what we called the data governance law, a little bit as the Data Governance Act at the European level, to ensure the citizen in the way we protect his data and the way we can anonymize his data and so on. But as you say, government has a lot of data, and there is the PSC regulation, which take us to give the data on an open access to everybody. That's why I wanted to put the project Unleashing Data in the recovery plan. What is unleashing data? That's a strategy which will lead us to give the most open data possible to the ecosystems, in the energy sector, but in all sectors that we can imagine.
And by when can you make that happen?
We have 3 years to complete the recovery plan. Eva knows that better than me. And so the first step is to manage the strategy. Then it's to make the take action to give those data. For example, we've spoken about the meteorological data. That's something really important, which is linked to the renewable energy. That's really important. So the job is on the table. We have the budget in the recovery plan to do that, and we are already working on these topics. That's really important. But
I would like to go to Kaastra, because they're preparing open data to release them amongst others, to the energy sector. Where do you see the opportunities for the Belgian energy suppliers with open data, for instance?
Well, as everybody in the industry will know, we will have more and more renewable power generation, which is dependent on the weather, and also the consumption will be more volatile because people come back with their electrical cars and start to charge or uncharge at less predictable moments. So I think these type of mega data, so it's not about individuals, but it's aggregated, anonymized mega data, will be really critical to be able to manage and balance the grid and provide services to keep the system resilient and keep the supply going. So the access of these open data is really critical for the industry, but also I would say for new energy service companies that can start to build more, I would say, innovative services on top of it to, I would say, reinforce and add value to the system as a whole.
Ladies and gentlemen, the energy sector is speeding up its digital transformation. In our country, the banking sector is a frontrunner in digitization. For instance, the smart banking app of Belfius was one of Europe's best. It was Europe's second best app in the sector. And we've asked the CIO of Belfius, Geert van Mol, what his advice would be for the energy sector.
A good strategy, in a few words, to digitize is customer-centric. It should be focused on your customers, or in B2B or in B2C. It should bring tangible value to your customers. Secondly, it's about efficiency, making processes instant, day and night, and that brings value to your customers, but also efficiency in your processes. And thirdly, it should be data-driven. My advice to the energy sector is to go full digital first. Not working on old systems, transform the old system to new systems that are future-proof. Secondly, go customer first. Because energy providers don't have that daily contact between customers and their company, and it makes them less performant than really day-to-day customer-facing service. I think there's an amazing opportunity for these companies to leverage their company and digital tools into the customer contact.
Geert van Mol on the digital strategy for the sector. Wytse, Kaastra, do you agree with what he said?
100%. I mean, I think it's 100% right. It starts with the customer or the consumer, we might also say. And it's important for every industry and every sector to start there. But I think for the energy sector it's even more important because the energy transition needs to be demand-driven. The customer, whether it's a residential customer or a big steel company, will need to pull the industry to provide the right services. Because if you only push, it's not going to work. We need to create the pull. So putting that end consumer at the heart of the change is really critical. And I think all the points are valid in the energy sector as well as in the banking sector. It's exactly the same.
Let's go to the boardroom. I think we have another question from Renaud de CROMBRUGGHE.
Yes, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Kaastra. As you know, energy sector is a heavily regulated market where digitalization increasingly blurs the borders. So how can we ensure a level playing field between energy suppliers and new service companies?
Excellent question. Well, I think first of all, let me make a comment that I think we are very lucky in Europe with the European Union, and I think the framework that Europe and the member states are giving the industry to create innovation, to create change, and to be able to, I would say, for the different players to play their game. If I compare that to other parts of the world, I think it's less obvious. It's also key that we make a clear difference between, I would say, the more monopoly regulated activities where you only have one grid operator. I mean, that's just a physical fact, and more the commercial side. And then we need to make sure that everybody needs to play by the same rules. I mean, that's really critical. In the same time, I think we have learned from all these digital unicorns and startups that sometimes you just have innovation where there is no regulation. It just happens. People come up with stuff and cool things that is front-running regulation. So there we need to have a little bit of flexibility, not to kill it immediately, but to allow it. But then quite quickly, of course, to make sure everybody can compete on the same premises. And I think honestly, it's healthy to have the incumbent industry to a certain extent in competing a little bit with energy services companies, because at the end of the day, competition drives innovation and brings society to a higher level. But of course, we need the right framework and the right rules of engagement.
Thank you very much. Kristian, Ruby, you have a very good transversal view on the European energy market. Do you already see well-identified digital champions within the energy suppliers with new digital services and products?
Absolutely. I think the best in class are already providing their customers with a whole range of new services, and a bit in the spirit of what Peter Hinsen said before, they're not just looking for energy services, they're looking outside their own lane for new types of adjacent markets where their customer systems, where the customer base and the data they have in an aggregated form can allow them to provide new types of services, be it financial services or mobility services. That way create new business and avoid being caught in a position as a mere commodity provider.
And you see the same kind of opportunities for Belgium, I imagine.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think it's basically about making sure that we act with that speed that Peter was also talking about. This is probably for our sector one of the biggest challenges, because we've been used to an asset base and a type of products that is related to big machines, and we've been used to having that obligation of securing supply and hence not making too much of a mistake. What the digital paradigm really commands us to do is to innovate at a much higher rate. Now, that can be a challenge, but actually it's also an opportunity in the sense that, as we've heard from this conference, we also need to move with unprecedented speed in the relation to the decarbonization. So speed as a culture and in relation especially to innovation and time to market is really going to be one of the critical things that the sector will need to focus on in the coming years. I was chairing a discussion on this with some of the champions from the sector that, by the way, came from the outside, a retailer that started up just a few years ago. And what they basically said was, you know, the innovation cycle in our sector would normally take at least 3 years, before you know what you're doing and you've tested it and everything. What they said was, well, we do that in 40 minutes. We create something and then we put it online and see how the customers react. So that's a completely different approach where you basically innovate in an iteration and a ping pong with the customer, and that's something that we will need to basically internalize as a sector in order to stay in this race. And I would say to the government representatives, I think one of the things that we really need from governments in this, apart from opening up the data and providing that level playing field, we need the fundamentals. We talked about internet connection speeds, but really one key area is the skills. Every single utility I talk to today is telling me the same story. We are in desperate want for candidates who have the skills to navigate the new digital world and to produce products and analysis in the way that can help us refine our products and innovate. So thinking about that cultural dimension in the school systems, in the education systems, and making sure that not only are people used to let's say the technologies, but also working in that more iterative, more Scrum-like mode in the education systems will be a critical thing where governments can really help make populations and ultimately the companies ready for a new digital paradigm that has a completely different timescale.
Thank you, Kristian. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've seen both government representatives here note everything you said, so your message is heard. Let's go to the boardroom. There's another question from THIERRY SAEGEMAN.
Yes, thank you first of all to everybody for the very useful insights. I have a question for Mrs. State Secretary, Mrs. De Bleeker. The sector will embrace digitalization even more than today. That's quite clear. From your point of view, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the feedback members in this evolution?
Yes, indeed. So the energy transition will come with lots of opportunities, but indeed also some challenges. And of course, I speak with the head of the State Secretary for Consumer Protection. So I look at the rights of consumers and how they will evolve. But I think it's really essential to state and to realize that energy consumption and production and distribution is not a zero-sum game. It's not when one wins, another one loses. Both have to be winners, so also consumers and also producers and distributors, in order to have a healthy energy environment. Economic and environmental sustainability, in my point of view, they go hand in hand, and it's my job to guarantee this. But yeah, so as far as consumer rights are concerned, they will also evolve. When the sector evolves, when we have this transition, of course they will evolve as well. We see that consumers become also producers of energy. Mr. Van den Bosch has already mentioned this before today. And so these new rights, they will be part of the revision of the transposition of the directives at the EU level, but also of the revision of the consumer agreement. And here we will clearly explain the existing consumer rights, but also include some new ones to keep up with the rhythm of this emerging market. I explained in my policy paper that I want to have this non-conflict model. I want to work together with the sector in order to find the right balance between consumer protection and, on the other hand, of course, the developments in the sector and give the companies all opportunities to use these developments for their benefit as well.
Okay, but Mrs. De Bleeker,
sorry.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because our time is limited. Mr. Kaastra, just a last question for you. After all you've heard today, do you see enough potential and opportunities for the Belgian energy suppliers to become frontrunners, to become the digital champions in the energy sector that we are waiting for?
Well, actually, it's interesting you asked the question, because I think Belgium has this interesting combination in Europe of being liberalized, so having all the benefits, I would say, of an innovative system, but also the complexity of having the different regions, different languages. I think you have an ambitious electrification agenda, so it's a bit, everything comes together in this small little country in the north of Europe. So with that, I think yes, and I think it gives also the opportunity, and to a certain extent the same is true for my country in the Netherlands, to create innovative companies that can, once you nail it here, you can bring it to the rest of Europe and potentially even to the rest of the world. So I would strongly encourage you to continue on that path.
Wytse Kaastra, Kristian Ruby, Eva De Bleeker and Mathieu Michel, thank you very much for being our guests today.